For Creamer Media's Polity, I'm Shannon de Rehove. Technology and IT analyst Arthur Goldstuck joins me to discuss his latest book, Tech Savvy Parenting, which he co-authored with creative parenting expert Nikki Bush. You are an internet pioneer and you are also regarded as South Africa's leading expert on internet and mobile technology trends. Which trends do you believe specifically target children and teenagers, and what advice would you give to parents in managing these trends?
There are probably three major trends that are affecting every child and teenager and the parent of these children and teenagers in the next few years. The first is the dramatic shift from ordinary feature phones and basic phones to smartphones, because what that means is also a shift from phones that just make calls and do SMS type messaging to ones that can do instant messaging, social networks, browsing and the like. So the challenge for parents is to learn how the technology works almost before it arrives. And that doesn't mean they have to be able to look into the future, but it does mean they have to get to grips with the technology on their own devices before their children get similar kinds of devices. But it's not only about the technology itself, it's also about having control over the device and over the child's use of the device. And that can only happen if the parent sets parameters for the use of that device up front. It's very difficult to get control back once you've given it up to the child. So you need to be in control from the beginning. The second big trend, of course, is social networking and instant messaging becoming such an integral part of our communications lives. And even in schools, we are seeing, for example, WhatsApp groups are the way that sports fixtures are organized, or certainly the team talk ahead of the fixture and the coordination of arriving and being collected from sports fixtures, all happening via these WhatsApp groups. Before that, it was BBM groups. In future, it might be WeChat groups. So it'll keep evolving, and there'll continually be new tools, new platforms, and new options as well. And that's really what makes it such a big challenge. One, that it is so integral to the lives of our children now, and the second, that it keeps evolving. So it feels difficult to keep up. But the parent needs to understand what tools are being used, what is more popular. And I guess that's part of the purpose of the book and the material that we are providing along with the book online and in various other forums. So the idea is that it's a big challenge. We've done some of the homework for parents, and we'll help them to meet that challenge. The third big trend we're seeing is the transformation of the classroom into a technology-based classroom from being just a teacher-based classroom. And that usually revolves around bringing tablets into the classroom, and it was led by the idea of the iPad classroom. So the iPad was used as a teaching tool, as a learning tool, and sometimes even replacing the teacher. But when it gets to that point, you know it's gone too far, because technology is there to enhance learning, not to replace the teacher. So the teacher needs to learn to embrace tablets in order to improve learning, to help the teachers learn better, but to also enhance their teaching. The moment the technology replaces what the teacher does, then you have a problem on your hands, because it's not real teaching. It's just almost another form of TV broadcasting to your classroom, and that's never been regarded as an ideal form of teaching.
What inspired you to write a book on raising children safely in a digital world, and what research was involved?
It's a question that's been coming up for many years. How do parents cope with their children's use of technology, and especially the fact that their children often know more than they do? And for years I've been pushing the same argument, that parents need to share their children's technology lives with them. And then myself and Nikki Bush appeared together on a radio show to address this exact question. I spoke from my usual technology point of view, and Nikki from her creative parenting point of view that she lectures on regularly. And we realized that our viewpoints dovetailed very neatly. We were actually well aligned in our thinking, and there wasn't an incompatibility between my technology-based arguments and Nikki's parenting-based arguments. And we had a chat about it after the interview and agreed that we should write a book about it sometime. And that was less than a year ago. So in the meantime, Nikki obviously thought about it a lot more while I was off doing my research on the trends that are shaping the mobile world. And she then approached me and said, "Shall we meet and chat about this?" and she's really been driving it very hard, and I've been quite excited about the idea of the book, so I've been a very happy participant in the process.
How can technology positively affect children and assist parents in raising digitally aware children?
The technology helps prepare the child for the world of work of the future. Not that you can learn from your tablet or your smartphone how you're going to do a job in 5 or 10 years' time, because the technology today is not what we'll be using in 5 or 10 years' time. And also, as you keep hearing when you read up on the topic or listen to discussion of the topic, and also what we keep saying in the book, is that the jobs that our children will do one day probably don't exist today for the large part. So the way to prepare them for that world of work is to give them the tools that will enable them to feel compatible with that environment and to be able to work in the mode that will be required in that future. And there's almost no question about the fact that that world of work of the future is going to rely very heavily on collaboration and the ability to work in teams. And that's what the technology that we're seeing today really enhances in a dramatic way and in a very real way. And a lot of children are actually using those kind of tools already, collaborating with each other on projects, in discussions, in these WhatsApp groups for sports teams, for example. They're getting a sense of what collaborative work is like in a digital environment. And that is one of the great preparations for the future. But that's just one of many areas where we believe technology can have a tremendously positive impact on the children. But it's important also that they be steeped in the values that will enable them to use the technology positively and not see it as a gateway to all that is negative. And the kind of scare stories that you hear about the use of technology becoming real for them.
What are the greatest risks to children posed by new technologies?
The biggest risks for children revolve around lack of parental responsibility and lack of parameters for their use of technology. Because when that happens, they are basically being exposed to the big bad world that their parents are hoping to protect them from. So the analogy we always use is that you wouldn't let your children under the age of, say, 10 or 12 roam around freely in a shopping centre, certainly not in South Africa. So why would you let them roam around freely in the digital environment? The dangers are just as real.
In general, what advice would you give regular internet users about protecting their online reputation?
There's one very simple rule that I've been sharing for about 6 years now, ever since social networks became a big thing in South Africa. And that is, anything you say in a social networking environment is the equivalent of standing on a soapbox and declaring it to the world. So put yourselves in the shoes of someone standing on a stage in their school, addressing an audience consisting of their friends, their classmates, their teachers, and their parents, and perhaps their grandparents even. And think, would I say this in front of that audience? If you're not willing to say it in front of that audience, or you think it's too risque or too dangerous to say in front of that audience, then don't say it in social media, because it's the equivalent of addressing that very same audience.
What can we expect from you in the future?
Well, we're hoping that there'll be a sequel to this book in the next couple of years that will perhaps focus on the teaching side or even aimed specifically at children. But one of the things that we've asked readers of this book to do is share with us their stories of becoming tech-savvy parents. And perhaps that in itself could lead to the next book, parents' own advice on parenting in a digital age. On a personal level, though, my dream is to write a science fiction novel one day, and I'm hoping that will happen in the next few years.
That was technology and IT analyst Arthur Goldstuck discussing his book, Tech Savvy Parenting.